Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for joining. For those who haven't been able to, there's a full recording going to be posted online, and like to keep this a hands-on active session, so feel free to put any questions that you have on the chat facility. So welcome, this is the 5th episode of Mastering Seating Assessments. This time our focus is on bariatric or plus size patients. We're very privileged to have Anita Rush joining us, who's an expert in this field. So just to touch on briefly on the agenda. So we're going to be touching on risks and assessment points to look out for when you're carrying out a seating assessment for a plus size patient. We're then going to look at how we can support clients with postural solutions, how we can correct positioning, give effective pressure relief and other options. Then we're going to learn a bit more about different chair types and functions, so to give clients better care and enhance lives. Ben will join us for that and give one of our assessors and give a live demonstration on screen. We'll also touch on funding, avenues of funding streams that can be utilised to help with purchasing new seating, and then we'll have live question and answer session. So for those of you that don't know much about Vivid Care, who are we? So we've been supporting the healthcare sector for just over 50 years now. We were previously Yorkshire Care Equipment and rebranded a couple of years ago. Our mission is to enhance quality of life by advancing care, and we're trusted by many thousands of healthcare professionals who work along with a lot of occupational therapists, physiotherapists in not just the community but also acute settings. Our main specialism is in seating, but we also supply quite a few rehabilitations and mobility products. And we're part of a wider group called Core Care Group. Some of you may know Innova Care Concepts, and then also Aquadapt. So at this point, without further ado, I will hand over to Anita. Welcome, Anita. It's our privilege to have you on here, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen now. Oh, you're still sharing, so someone.
Anita.
Yeah, I need you to.
There we go.
Okay, let's start again. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for this session of Mastering Seating Assessments for Plus Size Individuals. When I was asked to do this presentation, I thought, what am I going to do? Because there's a plethora of plus size seating videos out there, lots of people doing it. So I'm going to take this from a different approach, and I'm going to look at the individual, and I'm going to look at us as professionals. So I'm going to take it from that approach rather than actually focus fully on the equipment that is out there to provide appropriate seating for plus size individuals. So first of all, we hear there's a lot about all this marvelous new drug that's coming out to reduce the prevalence of plus size and bariatric people. But in reality, we are still getting bigger. And I'm not going to read the slides. I'll take bits off of them, but I will, I'm not sure if you get the slides, but if you do, then you can take these figures off. So we're looking at obesity. The College of Contemporary Health obesity population have come up with these figures of 3,000 people per day costing the NHS an estimated 1 billion. And then we go on to the Nuffield Trust, which is saying how the prevalence has increased, and that by 2034, we're going to have 70% of adults that be overweight. And then we have to look at our children. And this is the worrying part, is the amount of children that are now becoming overweight and will become overweight adults in the following coming years. So we need to think about how are we going to manage these individuals, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with human beings. So we all know about body shapes, somotypes, morphology, all different types of people, all different organizations, all different people describe body shapes as different somotypes, morphology. But getting down to the gist of it, we have apple shape, pear shape, proportional, anarchica, and bulbous region, which I think we are all well aware of within the work and within the environments we work. And then we look at obesity and comorbidities. Well, when we're looking at comorbidities, we're looking at all the on costs that we have when we have people with the obesity, with nutrition. We're looking at sleep apneas, blood pressure, all of these things we're aware of, hygiene, social isolation, but all of this encompasses that actual assessment that we are doing for that individual when we go out and try and manage their care and their seating. So I looked at this and I thought, well, how can we look at this as clinicians, as practitioners? And really what we're reflecting on is what type of seating we need for that plus size individual. It's a thoughtful and introspective approach to seating and considerations for that plus size individual. It's about the reflective design and dealing with the principles. It's about involving thoughtful approaches to evaluating and how we're going to get to that end solution. So I picked out some key factors here, really. And what we look for is aim. Are we aiming for the good enough, or are we aiming for the perfection? And we are focusing on the practical and effective solutions. And these are not easy. And the second one is about downshifting occasionally. Sometimes we have to take a break to reflect and recharge during that assessment process. Are we getting it right? Are we actually going down the right route? And that's about the next one, which leads quite nicely into it, is about pondering the issues. What are the challenges? How do we explore the alternatives to the seating? What other perspectives of those challenges do we have? And then finally, we look at pausing. No seating, managing plus size individual. You can't solve the problem all in one day. It takes time. It takes time. It takes a lot of revisiting. So by pausing and measuring up and regularly reassessing your progress and adjust as you need to. And that is what, as a practitioner, I feel that I try to do when I'm actually going out to do an assessment for a plus size individual. So on reflecting, what seating considerations do I need for a plus size population? What do we need? We need to think of that individual. We need to think of them. What have they experienced? So they have a general weakness. The bigger you get, the more that you mobility reduces and you get more fatigue. You certainly get pain, especially around the knees. We have a lot of increased soft tissue, leading to tissue viability. But when you are plus size, you also can get pelvic instability. And that, if you have pelvic instability, will actually compound your fatigue. It will compound your pain. So we then think, well, you've got a plus size body shape, you've got more of a risk of anterior pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt, and you've got increased lumbar lordosis. And if a person is feeling that overwhelming tiredness of what they're getting in that weakness, maybe we need to consider what their body posture and their body shape is. Sacral sitting, a posterior pelvic tilt in an individual who is postural sitting, sacral sitting, is where the actual iliac spine is higher than the posterior superior iliac spine. So then we might have problems with kyphosis. And plus size people aren't immune to any of this. All of this will get with your fatigue and with your general weakness will be incorrect seating dimensions, pelvic instability, limited hip flexion, tight hamstring muscles, weak abdominal muscles. So all of these will actually contribute to that plus size individual's uncomfortable and seating and their well-being. So where do we start? Where do we start? Looking at these legs, looking at where we are, what type of seating would we need for this poor lady with all of these nodules and with the widths of their legs? You know, she was can't see her feet. You can see her feet in seating, but you can't see her feet in when she's sat in the chair, and you can't see her feet when she's in standing. So this lady, when we met her, you might not agree with me, but her legs in standing were 87 centimeters, and her legs in sitting were 86. And trying to find something that was comfortable for her took quite a while. It didn't happen overnight. So again, consideration, what type of seating? And she slept in the chair 24/7. And this gentleman, how do you think he felt? Have we got his breathing satisfactory? How would he eat in this? How is he hanging on? He's got large legs. Is he actually comfortable? And we could turn around and say, no, he's not. And he himself would admit that he didn't enjoy sitting in his seat, in his chair. So what's the assessment about then? We need to think of the assessment as being, is it going to be static? Is that weight going to be static? Or is it going to fluctuate? We know that sometimes plus size people have episodes of binge eating, they have psychological issues, and they sometimes will go on that eating journey. We also need to think about where the weight is distributed, where that spread of weight is, where the center of gravity of that individual is, especially with the larger leg, because that can affect the balance. It can actually you're going to get less muscle control. And sometimes plus size people can't feel their legs. So you've got to think about that increased risk of falls. Body dynamics I've talked about. When I'm doing a plus size seating assessment, I also use the mobility function independence measure, known as the FIM tool. Now, a lot of you might know what the FIM tool is, and it is a huge tool. But actually, you can take out of that FIM tool sections that you need and design your assessment, your mobility assessment tool from the basics of that FIM tool. It is really good, and I've used it for a long time. Are we going to rehabilitate out that top chair? Rehabilitation is another one. How is that assessment going to include that rehabilitation if you are going to put that into your care plan and within your care regime? The other thing is pressure care, moisture. How are you going to manage the moisture in the skin folds? What are you going to do? What are you going to do with the pannus that's resting on those legs, which will then affect the circulation? How are you going to slightly raise that pannus up so that you can actually allow the circulation to continue. And how are you going to absorb the moisture that is between the legs and the pannus? And also, you've also got shear on shear skin friction. All of these things you need to take into account. You've also got to look at how the positioning in the chair, what the material is, because fatigue, when I do training, sometimes I ask the delegates to sit up and see how long they can sit up for at a certain angle. And if you don't have the correct seating, your plus size individual is going to get fatigue and they're going to start to actually slide down the chair purely because of they're not comfortable, and it's about maintaining their posture. So you're going to get shear and friction there as well. You've also got pain, osteoarthritis, especially in the knee bone or on the bone, and severe joint pain. So they're going to be wriggling about if they can with all these things, all these extra shear and friction, weight and pain as they're sitting in that chair. The other thing I want to consider is respiratory. How are we going to get that person in that chair comfortable so they actually can have good respiratory function, that they have got the tubes that are open, they're able to breathe, they're able to be active, and also nutrition. You know yourself, if you're not comfortable, you might not eat much. So the nutritional and the fluid functions of that individual is important when we are looking and considering the seating for a plus size person. And carrying on with the assessment, what else do we need? Well, one is manual handling. How are we going to handle that person within that chair? What equipment are we going to use? We need to decide whether this is static loading in this chair or whether this person is going to be dynamic seated, where the actual person can fall into a chair when they're trying to get into it instead of sitting down like some people do, like we do. They will fall into the chair, those uncontrollable movement, and that weight will double. And then you've got to think about where the weight is if you've got dynamic person, because it will then actually gravitate towards the front casters. So again, static loading, hoisting in, the patient doesn't move. Dynamic, where the person has got more movement in that chair. So when you're looking at the chair itself, we have the impact of the transfers, but we've also got to look at the benefits of having a vertical or tilt function within that chair. Okay, because some plus size people can't cope with the tilt function due to their body dynamics. They've got a heavy pannus. If you're going to tilt, is that going to then push them forward and then put them at risk of falls? If the vertical one is better, it's going to bring them up. You will have that more stability for them, where their feet are more stable on the ground and they're much wider through the hips rather than through the trunk. You've got to look at their psychological needs as well, and the positivity of that eye-to-eye contact. And when I'm talking about contact, I'm talking about conversation, talking that person through the task that we're trying to get them to do. And also, we need to think future proofing. Are we going to have to, at some stage, change the cushion within that chair? Will we need to make more extensions to that chair? So the modularity of a chair is another aspect we need to look at. We put the chair in, we need to look at the longevity of the chair and future-proof, if we can, for the future. And it isn't just about the weight of the individual. People say to me, Anita, what's the safety? What is the weight? Why? It's about that individual and how they carry their weight and how they position themselves in the chair, because they'll have a way in a chair that they feel more comfortable. And we know that if we put the wrong chair in, we're going to actually increase their poor posture, and they're going to have difficulties in maintaining independence. So for users with hip width or leg spread abducting more than 22 inches, would the standard equipment, does it work? What is the weight capacity for users over 25 stone, 158 kilos? On top of that, we need to look at the leg rest capability, because if a person is pear-shaped, then their legs are going to be bigger from the hips downwards. So we know that legs equate to 15.7% of that individual's weight. So what we're looking at here is whether or not the leg elevation of those chairs, the weight, safe working load of those, is actually increased to actually accommodate those heavy legs, because that's really important. And we need to look at the mechanism of that chair as well. So when the leg elevation comes up, if there is a gap, is that gap covered? Because with your large legs, actually you can squeeze the tissue between those gaps if there is not a cover to do that. So again, looking at the design of that leg elevation is really, really important. Mechanisms, tilting space, leg elevation, leg rest, how the back reclines. And sometimes, you know, 2 motors is not enough, especially with the weight of that individual's. And sometimes you have to look at 4 motor chairs so that each part of that chair can work individually to help that person adjust. So I've already alluded to the seat and leg elevation, but again, from a pressure care management, are those legs being protected from sharp objects? Is it padded? Has it got pressure relieving properties in it? And we need to look at the design of those chairs. What are the properties of the covering of those chairs, the microclimate, because we actually need to reduce some of the risk of moisture. Otherwise, we're going to get instances of decubitus ulcers. And also with that, the circulation will decrease. Comfort. Comfort's really important for a plus size person. It's important, like for all of us, finding a chair that you're really comfortable. And sometimes the chair will be used 24/7. It will be used as a bed. So are you looking at all the alternatives that that chair can offer if a plus size person uses it 24/7? And when a plus size person uses a chair 24/7, it's to maintain their independence. Many a time I have a plus size person who won't go in a bed because they can't get their heavy legs into a bed, although nowadays that can change. But they would use the chair because it enabled them their independence. They could get up and move around when they wanted. So it's not an issue 24/7 management in chair, as long as you've risk assessed it and the person is able to help the carers if they're going in with personal care. And it facilitates transfers, independence, as I've said. So again, the next thing we look at is the seating assessment. It's easy, but we also need to look at the testing of the seats. So I looked at this a long time ago, and there are something called the FERA standards. Now, the FERA standards F058 2017 covers all types of bariatric for seating for office, hospital contracts and domestic use. But it doesn't necessarily relate to rise and recliner chairs. There's no official standard for bariatric chairs for load limits on them, but it can be referred to within the standards. So you also need to, within those standards, look at space planning considerations. So we have expanded widths on the bariatric chair up to about 36 inches, expandable to about 54 inches. So those standards are quite important for anybody that is either designing or looking at plus size assessment for chairs, because they do give you some advice. I've missed one. No, I haven't. Right. So chair selection. I'm not going to read this. I'm not sure if you'll get the handout, I'm not sure. So we need to look at seat height, seat depth, seat width, armrest height from seat to base, back height. And I do think that when you're measuring for a plus size individual, it's not easy to do by yourself. So where possible, 2 practitioners for accuracy. And if we get the seat selection correct, we get improved posture. We get a taller back rest provides better support for the upper back and shoulders and promotes proper spinal alignment. Increased comfort. High backrests offer a more surface area for leaning back, reducing strain on the lower back. We like to get comfort. Enhanced lumbar support. A taller backrest can include built-in lumbar supports, which help maintain that natural curve. A good chair will reduce fatigue. Proper back support relaxes the muscles during prolonged sitting, especially for tasks that require focus or concentration. And one of the other things we need to look at is head and neck support. A high back support with head and neck facilities that allows that person to be absorbed into that chair reduces the risk of discomfort or strain. Plus size people have a larger base of support and limited for additional postural support. There still could be a need to be managed in standard seating. So think about it. A power tilting space chair can alter the angle the patient is sitting in whilst they're keeping themselves in a seated position, offering that extra comfort upright. And they can do that themselves. They can be independent. So if we're looking at additional support, we need to think about reconfiguring the backrest, waterfall effect that will actually got beads in it, as it's got Velcro, so we can interchange them and design the chair around them. We integrated pressure relief, putting a cushion on top of another cushion in a chair not only hires the patient, it causes them to tilt sideways, and also sometimes their feet will come off the ground. So integrated pressure relief is a must. I said leg elevation covered where there's a gap, really, really important. Robust and supportive arms. The chair needs foot plate options because not everybody puts their feet and their legs nicely on the leg elevation. If we go back to the plus size lady that I showed you earlier, her legs splayed. So you need a different type of a leg rest. So the options of having variable leg rests are also very, very important. Also, if we have a option where we can have a foot rest at the very bottom that comes up, that will also help with the shear coming down. So the foot plate option, and that enables that person to rest their feet against it. Again, pressure relieving properties. Do we need to pad that? Are we got them seated so they don't actually slide? I've already talked about waterproof options, low friction. We need to think about infection control as well. We need to think about how we're going to maintain that should there be accidents on the chairs. And that's why the actual fabrics are really, really important. Looking at cloth versus the low moisture and waterproof fabrics are far better in that respect as well. Battery backup. Supposing there's a power cut, is there going to be a battery pack at the back for that chair to still be managed in that power cut? And also, what is the warranties? What is the frame, the spare parts and everything? Is it 5 years, 10 years? All of these things we need to think of, because in this day and age, everything changes and we need to think about how long we can maintain that chair before the parts and the warranty what moves out. So we're looking again at this holistic approach to ensure that person is actually comfy in their chair. And when doing that, we need to look at the family, we need to look at the friends, and we need to look at the care and support staff. We need to make sure that we're putting in equipment, a chair, that actually they can manage that individual in. And we need to look at the type of casters, power functions, how heavy should we, casters should be putting on to make the movability smoother and safer. But I'd like to put a question mark against that. If we have a plus size person in a chair and they are, say, around about 25, 35 stone, and you've got the weight of the chair, right? You've got heavy casters, but are you really going to want to move that person very far in that chair? And also, how many carers you would need to actually move that individual in that chair? It's not about pushing, it's about the push-pull factors, but it's also about how we reduce the risk to the caregivers and their families when moving the chair. So we need to look at the flooring, the movability, and also how many carers. Not one, it should be two, but that would then depend. And then the circulation within the room. How much of a degree of turn do you need? How much do you need for that chair to actually be moved within the space that you have? If you look at a document, you've got the ergonomic envelope, you could use that to help you do your assessment. So probably just overlapped on this one. So when selecting the chair, I've already talked about access, steps, how's the chair going to get in there? When you do your assessment, have you done an agreement with the company? Have they asked you for a risk assessment to ask whether or not how access and egress to that room is going to be? How many stairs there are, door widths, turning angles, and circulation. And the space needs to account for the mechanism. The times that when I used to work within my role, I used to get people phoning me up and saying, Anita, the motor's burnt out because the person had the chair against the wall, because people like to be neat. So you need to make sure that you've got a measurement that says this is how far the chair will come away from the wall. The leg rest elevation as well. So you need to do those measurements to make sure that you've got the room to do that. Transfers, how are you going to do the transfers? The building integrity, again, floor types. Does the chair work with the manual handling equipment? Nothing is worse than putting a chair in and you've got a return or any equipment that's there, or a mobile hoist, and you then find that the two aren't compatible. Those things you need to find out before. And also when you're hoisting, does the chair, when it goes down and the boom of the hoist go up and the leg spread go round the chair? Otherwise, it's not going to work, and it's going to, that person who's being hoisted, the person that's there, actually will be saying to you, I don't want to do this. This is, I'm too heavy for you, and I'm not happy because it's hurting. And as I've already alluded to, the ergonomic envelope. So when we're doing this, we need to think about what are common mistakes and challenges. So please don't measure with a metal tape measure. Please use the fabric one. It's far more better. It's better for the individual, for their tissue viability and for their dignity, really. So it is very daunting trying to measure someone. And that's why I do say, if you can, do it with two people. And also, we need to think about where those measurements are going to be, the seat depth, the seat height. All of this incorrect will increase tissue damage. And then when we think about it, where are we going to measure? Everybody goes automatically hip to hip, but not always is the person they're widest at hip to hip. So you need to consider where that individual is at their widest in that chair. And for that other person also is their functional reach. If we put a chair in too wide because we think they're going to grow or something, then they can't function because their functional reach, the arm rests and what they're trying to do will be out of their range. So think about their functional reach when you're actually looking at a chair. And again, I keep alluding to comfort. So what good outcomes can we have from all of this? If we achieve good outcomes, we're going to have a transfer that will be easier for that individual, reducing the need for them to shuffle around in the chair. It will improve their quality of life. Their impact of weight will be reduced because we've got a chair that is functionally meeting that individual's need of getting in and out of the chair. And they will get an ideal seated pressure redistribution. So if we can get a chair, we're likely to get improved comfort, postural support, contracture tissue, and respiratory function and nutrition problems all will improve for that individual. So wrapping up on this, it's about, again, one size fits all approach to match plus size people doesn't always work. Sometimes it has to be some bespoke. It's sometimes we can, if it's a modular chair, it's much easier because we can adjust the chair. And providing bigger, as I've already alluded to, is not always the solution. It needs to meet that individual need. And discuss with the individual what your goals are with putting in this seating. What are you wanting to achieve with this seating? Are you just putting a seat in and that's it? Or are there goals or are there outcomes that you as individuals and patient have discussed that you want from that seating assessment and from that provision? So we look at the individual. We look at the plus size person, any additional considerations you might need, their psychological needs, the family needs, what the environment is. Are you going to get that in there? How we're going to measure and get the right measurements? What type of key chair selection you're going to do? There's a plethora of plus size chairs out there. What you need is a seat selection. You can try with the individual and then get a demonstration and make sure that you then have got a choice of what you're trying to get for best value for that individual and for their comfort. And modular for me is really important. So we're just going to touch on complex seating for a minute because sometimes I look at complex seating and I think to myself, well, we have the complex seating and we have got special postural management chairs. And yes, you can get them for plus size individuals, but they need to be customised and individualised for that individual because they have unique mouldings, etc. Not too different from what we would with someone that's got complex postural needs. We need to consider the stability of the chairs. Does it have a sturdy base and non-skid skid feet to prevent sliding or tipping? Will the weight of that individual actually compromise stability? Compatible with hoist and slings, things that we do as part of the norm all the time, tissue viability, respiratory and manual handling. If you're going to have an in-chair sling, how is that going to fit into that chair with that individual? And is it not going to affect any shear of friction on that? This one, when I was asked to do this one, I thought, interesting. Who funds the chair? Social, health, or 50-50? And it's interesting, isn't it? Because every area has a different approach to this. Because in Berkshire, where I am, we agreed that 50-50 on riser recliner chairs would be the way forward. because there's always an issue, there's always a social need, and there's also a health need, tissue viability, social interaction. So we, in the end, decided on 50-50. So when does it become 100% health? When the person has postural needs. That's what we decided, again, where I am, that if it's a person is 100% with postural needs, then that would be a health perspective. But in other areas, that doesn't work. Continuing healthcare. Well, if the person is funded by continuing healthcare, then in Berkshire, again, we would provide the equipment, which would include the seating. And social, well, social care, manual handling, we're talking about here, social interaction. So within your areas, do you have the processes which will help you determine which is social care, continuing health? It's so complex, it really is. And it doesn't matter if I say what we do in Berkshire, we can be sure that someone else in another area has a different outlook on it. So again, that I have to say is down to you within your organisations and within your localities. So wrapping up on this, concluding, different body shapes require different options. Different people have skills, ability, goals and fears. Whilst the weight is significant, it is a way in which a person's body mass is distributed that is also key to finding the right fit. And often, you know, there's not the perfect answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. There's a lot, as always, to digest. And yeah, if it's okay with you, we will share those slides, because I think there's a lot of very useful references and information in there. So thank you once again. A few questions I've got, but if you just really encourage all participants, pop the questions on the chat. What we'll move on to now is a live demonstration from Ben Sterling, one of our seating assessors. So he'll touch on a few of the practical points, and then after that session we will go through the questions which come over the chat and tap into some of Anita's resource and expertise. Thanks very much, Ben.
Well, thank you, George, and thank you, Anita. As you've heard from that presentation there, an awful lot of stuff to consider. It's very much the case that it's not one size fits all. There are a lot of things to go through, to understand about any given situation. And so what we're going to do, we're going to look at our product here that we've developed in line with all of that. Before I get going into that, can I just check from everybody in the chat there, or just a quick thumbs up emoji or something that you can hear me okay? Well, I've got one from George. That's very encouraging, George. Thank you. Brill. So yeah, what we'll do, we'll go through the chair. We'll go through the chair together now. So this one that you see right here, this is our Lento BLTR chair. This is our 40-stone version. We have two different versions. We have this one and we have our 50-stone version as well. As we go through this, you will start to understand just why we've got two different versions. This one here has a seat width between 24 and 28 inches in adjustment. So obviously when we're considering an individual, we may be looking at this one, we may have to go, if you look at the example that was used in the presentation, we'd probably be looking at the 50-stone version for that particular lady there. So it is just a case of understanding that. Now, a lot of what we do when we're doing an assessment with an OT, a lot of these sorts of questions will be asked at the point of booking the assessment, and it just really does help us get the right product out to you to actually run through. Okay, so this is very much a modular chair. Everything on here is adjustable, replaceable, and movable. And it's very much in line with what Anita's been talking about here today, that we do need to ensure that we're going for the long term here, that we're going to be able to adjust and change anything in the chair to follow the journey of the individual, to ensure we're giving them the best postural support, but the best level of comfort as well. So on this chair, at the very back of this chair, we've got 2 bolts just underneath the chair there. We just undo them by hand, and that will then give us the option to bring the width of the chair in and out to where we want it to be. If I take this actual arm off, you can see here we have got some protective fabric there as well, just to avoid any entrapment issues. We've also got the ability here to adjust the arm height of the chair between 6 and 9 inches of adjustment, so that we can get the right level of arm height and support for the individual there on both sides. The overlay itself, this is a removable overlay that we have in place there. So this does ensure that we can either upgrade. The screen's gone blank. Are you okay to check that out there for me, George? Let me know when I'm back, everybody.
Apologies, it should be correcting itself now.
Wonderful. So yes, the overlay on here is a removable one. So it's actually, this one is actually on magnets, but then at the back we do have 2 extra clips there to secure it in place at the back. Reason for that, depending on how people transfer, they might pull the overlay with them. Sometimes you might have found that with other removable overlays. With this one, we've ensured that that doesn't happen, because it's never going to be pulled away from the actual frame of the chair, but it is easy to remove and swap round should you need to. As a standard, we go with a high level pressure care in the seat itself. We have like a gel overlay on this one. We can put gel in the legs as well. That is something that is often asked for, so it can come all the way down here. And we do also have a foot plate that we can attach to this chair, should we need that as well. One thing you will see on the arms as well, there is a slight clearance from the floor. The reason for that, and again, Anita alluded to it, we need to consider how people are transferring. If some people are using Sara Steadies, or if they're using some sort of stand aid, they might need to get around the edge of the chair there. Especially though, if they're being hoisted, we will need to get that around the edge. So having the arm just clear of the floor gives us that freedom to do that. You may see from the video, from the screen there, that we are on casters here today. That is the standard sort of default we go with this. They are all braked casters. They are pretty sturdy. But again, as Anita said, you might not want that depending on the environment you're in. We can swap these out for just standard solid platforms, basically in place of the casters, to ensure that the chair is not going to be moving anywhere. Again, we stuck with the casters because we're thinking in the likelihood of transferring or needing to maneuver the chair just slightly to actually get in line for an individual. You might well need to just have that ability to shift and move as and when. Okay. Moving up the backrest, all of these cushions here, they are removable, and they are all on magnets. They come as standard on magnetic sticks. You can adjust and swap these round to whichever sort of format you'd like. You can see here we've got these lateral cushions. That's our standard sort of setup, but you don't have to have these. Some people do prefer them, other people not so much. So giving you the option on that. But each of these you can adjust the wadding on. You can just simply unzip at the back, take out whatever wadding you want, or add to, depending on what you feel is needed. So what we find a lot, or what I found a lot in my experience, is if we're dealing with someone, for instance, who's got a gluteal shelf, we're going to need to make some amendments to this lumbar cushion here to ensure that we're accommodating that, but not sacrificing comfort, but supporting the shape properly within this with this particular chair. Now, moving on to the functions of the chair. Bring that in. What we've chosen to do, or the way we've engineered our chair, is to actually split out each and every function. Now, again, this is very much what Anita's been talking about with you today. The need for something that goes beyond your standard dual motor is quite common. Somebody who's tilting back with the legs coming up and then has just the ability to open up a back angle, it doesn't always satisfy or meet the needs of that person. So what we found is individualizing each and every function. So from the leg function, which I'm just about to show you now, opening up the legs, separating out the tilt and the rise function, as well as the back angle, it just ensures that we're able to accommodate how the weight might distribute from each individual person. Now, going into the weight levels and weight limits, this particular one, it's got a 25 stone weight limit just on the leg rest alone. So that is sturdy enough to actually support anybody that's needing that level of weight distribution. I'm just going to tilt it back. So we've got our tilt function separated out there. So you can see very quickly as well, we've got a good level of elevation coming from this chair. And we have an articulating leg rest action underneath, which follows the line and extension of the legs. We also have our cover here, separated, keeping support on the gap, but we can make some amendments and customizations if you felt that was needed. So there's your tilt and your leg. We've also got the ability to make those changes to functions at the same time if you wish to. And we've also got our back angle individually from it as well, and our rise function. So the way I tend to do this whenever I'm assessing an individual, I will look at, as Anita said there, I'll see where the weight is being distributed across the body, and then I will make the adjustments accordingly from that. So some cases it might be that the way they're sat currently is restricting their breathing a little bit. So opening out the back might actually help in that instance and just kind of take some of the pressure away. In other cases, you might well find that you need to just lift the legs up before tilting back, or you might need to tilt first and then legs after. It does vary from person to person, but giving you as an individual, giving the patient the ability to make each and every individual tweak and change is really quite a vital part of why we've made the chair the way we have. As I said before, we can make an awful lot of customizations to this. We've got we've done all sorts of stuff around the backrest side of things, the armrest side of things. So really on a case-by-case basis, we can make some tweaks and changes depending on what's actually needed. But quite often we find great success with the standard sort of setup that we have here as well. It's a difficult one to kind of process and explain very quickly through a demonstration such as this, because ultimately there are so many sort of weird and wonderful examples you could go out there. But I think the key things for us is that we've got enough support for the legs. We've got the tilt function there to give as much weight distribution as possible and take pressure off certain areas. And we've got the ability to increase and adjust the pressure relief within the chair. The material itself inside is your Dartex. It is an easy wipeable surface. It stretches every way it needs to actually support that individual from a pressure care point of view. We do have other fabric options around that if that was a concern. Some people do worry sometimes about the sweating side of things with that, so there are options there. But ultimately, we have to be flexible in that, and the chair that we've developed allows that flexibility to ensure that we're doing the very best for the individuals that are in need of this sort of equipment. I hope that makes sense. Is there any questions or thoughts?
Ben, apologies if you've already touched on this, but is it worth showing the rise function and both how it can go up vertically and tilt?
That's a very polite way, George, of saying I forgot the function. Thank you. So the rise function on the chair, you're absolutely right, George. We have got the ability here to rise it up normally. But again, as we were saying before, distributing the weight and the way people like to stand up, you can see very quickly if the weight is distributed more at the front, the idea of doing this might offset them very quickly. They might feel very uncomfortable at the idea of that. One thing I like to suggest, while people are getting used to it, at the very least, is to open up the back angle so they don't feel like they're being pushed. But as George has rightly pointed out, if we use the tilt function as well as the rise function at the same time, what we end up having is more of a vertical rise. So that is a much nicer way of coming up, and they can still at the end of that tip themselves if they wish to, but giving you separating out the functions the way we have just allows for that individual to feel in control of the situation, not forced and pushed forward, and they're able to go at their own pace in a steady way, so that they're not actually they're actually steadying themselves and they're ready to stand before actually taking that step. It just gives everybody a lot more control over that. The other thing I meant to mention as well is we do have depth adjustment on this chair, so you can bring the backrest further forward or take it further back. We've got between 18 and 22 inches in terms of seat depth adjustment. So again, thinking of your gluteal shelves, thinking of maybe where the weight's distributing, you might want to allow for that by just increasing the depth a little bit. And then we can also tweak some cushioning at the back if we needed to. But yeah, a whole host of adjustments and availability just within the standard setup, as I was saying before.
Thanks for that, Ben. It might be worth us mentioning as well, something to be wary of, as Anita alluded to, in what to look for when carrying out assessment, is to have an assessment of the actual chair with the patient, because you find with some might be a single motor or dual motor chair, the way that the chair rises will be fixed in the way that it does it. So what I mean by that is what Ben illustrated then was that we could adjust the rise, we could adjust the tilt separately, we could adjust the back angle separately, and that kind of customizes the rise for that particular patient. Whereas with a more basic so a chair with very few motors, whilst it might be a lot more pleasing monetarily, so from a money perspective, it might not be that it facilitates for that patient. So it's just something to bear in mind there, that when a chair can, generally the more motors a chair has, the more expensive it is, but it's for important reasons, to give the patient that support and safety. Well, thank you very much for that, Ben, for that demonstration. There are a few questions which have come in. So one from Susie here. So what width is the 50 stone chair, please? So the chair that Ben's showing is actually the 40 stone version, which is adjustable in seat width from 24 to 28 inches. The 50 stone version is 28 to 32 inches. Now, some of you will have come across patients who need wider than that. That can be done. We've settled with, if you like, a couple of more standard options, but certainly any bespoke options which need larger than that, that's no problem at all.
Just to add to that, George, as well, a lot of people will then start to get worried about how's that going to fit through a door, how's that going to fit through into someone's property. We don't actually have to do too much adjustment to the final width of the chair. What we would simply do is maybe take a bit of measurement of the inside of each arm, and then you're still getting an increased range, but you're not getting a wider chair. So just to give you a bit of reassurance. Also as well, the backrest comes off, the arms come off, and the seat base there all come like dismantle, so you can actually get the thing through any sort of property, standard property, quite well. There was another question there, so George, you're going to call it out for me?
Yeah, thanks. Just on that, the modularity of the chair is important, like Ben alluded to. So just simply getting it through doorways, we can take the wings off very easily. We can take the arms off. So it's not like a fixed piece of furniture where we're having to sort of get it through French doors or remove doors and that kind of thing. Do you want to add something, Anita? You've unmuted. No. I had a question here from Louise. So in terms of the weight limit on the leg rest, so it is exactly the same both on the 40 and the 50 stone version, 25 stone on the legs there. And then Question here from Andrea in relation to, in the event of a power cut, what battery life does the chair have? So might be worth mentioning there's a couple of battery backups, if you like. So in most transformers, you'll have the facility where you can put a couple of little 9-volt batteries in there. Now that will only last really for one recline or one rise. When we speak about a battery pack, this is an individual box either mounted on the chair or separately to the chair. What would you say, Ben, we've got to be bearing in mind for a plus size patient, it would just be probably a handful of uses, wouldn't it, before it needed to be put on charge again?
It's a difficult one to say. I tend to suggest, I mean, if you were to ask a manufacturer, they'd probably inflate that figure. I would say it's probably around 4 to 6 hours, given I'm trying to account for how much movement and adjustment they might need to do. So I'm trying to be realistic there. A manufacturer will probably say 8 hours, but it's a hard one to tell. It's really based on how that person needs to adjust. And you'll find as well, again, the reason for separating out functions is because throughout the day, they'll need to change their position. They'll need to tilt, they'll need to come forward. If they're eating, they'll be sat upright. If they want to have a snooze, the legs will be coming up, the back will be coming up. All of those movements obviously will drain the battery. So I'd say 4 to 6 hours is probably a better or more accurate read on how much a Freedom Pack will last for you.
That's great. And just from an environmental aspect, something to bear in mind is the physical weight of the chair combined with the weight of the patient. Now, it's probably, I would say, rarer, but it might be that the patient is upstairs. It might be worth speaking to somebody in adaptations or even a surveyor as to, if you are worried about the strength of the flooring, what a simple solution you can go for is a piece of marine ply, so it distributes the weight more evenly of the chair on the floorboards. That might even be applicable on the ground floor. So it is just something to bear in mind, because we're talking of quite a lot of physical weight going down, if the chair is on casters or feet, going down through 4 particularly points there. Just had a question from Susie, one for you, Ben. So what is the seat height on the chair?
Yep. So with this one, before you get any sort of tilt forward on the chair, so we've got a bit of a range going. The base height on this is 18 inches in seat height, but before you can actually get 4 inches of vertical rise off this before it starts to tip forward. So if you have someone slightly taller and you think, well, we could do with 19, you can just elevate that up an inch and it will still be sturdy enough to sit in and it won't be doing any harm. So we tend to say 18 to 22 inches, but 18 is the base height, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's maybe worth just reiterating that it's not like when you take the chair back into recline, the chair goes, say, back down to the ground before reclining as a typical recliner does. As Ben's saying, you can adjust that height separately to the backrest, the tilt, and the leg rest. So you can very quickly individualize it for a certain patient.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's been, thank you for that, Ben, and I think as well, thank you very much, Anita, for your presentation. There was a lot to digest and go over. There was the interesting as to the standards, certainly something for us to look into a bit more detail. So we just had another question here from Susie. So I need chair for 16.5-inch seat height. Ben, did you want to touch on what you've been able to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something we could consider, certainly. I'd need to double check with manufacturer, but you can see on here we've used the casters. I would imagine we'd probably be looking at static then, because that's maybe taking 2 inches out of the equation, so you probably get your 16.5 there. What they might do, though, to be bearing in mind, they might adjust the actual padding here so it's not scraping along the floor when moving up and out as well. So there may be a bit of a trade-off. Again, Anita suggested that sometimes we don't get the perfect fit on everything. There is an awful lot to consider, but that sounds like something we certainly could accommodate for you. So maybe bob an email after, and we can follow up and see what we can do.
Great, thanks for that, Ben. So we'll just conclude the webinar now. I'll just pull up the presentation. Yes, I just want to really draw your attention to our resources. So we've got a considerable amount on the website, which are absolutely free in terms of jumping on there and downloading them. We will be shortly posting an ebook, so look out for that, particularly around plus size patients. But there's many other things. One is a charity listing, which we've kind of worked on for many years. So going back to Anita's slide on the funding, we all know how tight the funding is, both from a health and a social care perspective. So it might be that, you know, that there's a charity that's able to support in terms of the costs on the chair. So feel free to jump on the site, and you know, any questions there, just give us a shout. One particular one here, not as comprehensive as what Anita's gone over, but you know, that what factors do we consider, and it just can give you some kind of prompters, if you like, a blank assessment form, and give you a bit of a steer as to what to ask for, what to consider when with the patient. So this is a program of webinars. We're on just completed episode 5. So next month, watch out for the episode on people with multiple sclerosis. As said, this webinar is recorded, so it will be available to download and look at other times as our previous webinars, and we'll share the slides that Anita kindly put forward for us. So thank you once again, everybody, for joining. Thank you for sparing your time. Our contact details here on screen. I think you'll have picked up Anita's on her first slide. Thank you very much, Anita, for what you've gone over, and we wish you all a good afternoon.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a good one.
Thank you.